The envelope sat innocently among the stack of mail on my kitchen counter, plain white with the Fairview National Bank logo, stamped in blue across the corner. I noticed it last, after sorting through the utility bills and junk mail that arrived with depressing regularity. Only when I'd finished my second cup of morning coffee did I pick it up and turn it over in my hands, puzzled. I couldn't recall any business with Fairview National. Their branch was on the other side of Concord, nowhere near the local credit union where I'd banked for 30 years. I slid my finger under the seal and pulled out the single sheet of paper inside. Dear Mrs. Toiver, this letter serves as a reminder that your mortgage payment is now 60 days past due. The words blurred as my eyes jumped to the figure below. 7,243 fives. 80. What in God's name? I whispered, my hands beginning to shake. I forced myself to keep reading. According to the letter, I was delinquent on my second monthly payment for a mortgage loan of 950,000 dinar. Originated in March of this year, if the arrears weren't paid within 14 days, the bank would be forced to initiate foreclosure proceedings. My first instinct was to laugh. Some ridiculous mistake. I'd never borrowed such an obscene amount of money in my entire life. My modest house on Elm Street, the one Harold and I had purchased 32 years ago, had been paid off for over a decade. Why on earth would a 67-year-old widow need a mortgage for nearly $1 million? I picked up the phone and dialed the number printed at the bottom of the letter. After navigating through an automated menu and waiting on hold for what felt like an eternity, I finally heard a human voice. Fairview National, this is Melissa speaking. How may I help you? Yes, hello. My name is Winifred Toiver, and I've just received a letter about a delinquent mortgage payment. There must be some error. I never took out a loan from your bank. Let me pull up your account, Mrs. Toiver. One moment, please. While she searched, I gazed out my kitchen window at the small garden Harold had helped me plant years ago. He'd been gone 10 years now, and I still sometimes expected to see him, out there, kneeling among the tomato plants, dirt under his fingernails. 43 years of marriage, and then nothing. Well, not nothing. I had the children, Harper and Lennox, though they'd built their own lives and rarely thought of their mother, except when they needed something. Mrs. Toiver. Melissa's voice pulled me back. According to our records, you did take out a mortgage loan on March 14th of this year. The amount was $950,000, with a 30-year term. The property financed was located at 27 Lakeview Terrace in Concord. That's impossible, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. I've never signed any loan documents, especially not for that kind of money, ma'am. We have all the required documentation. Your signature on the loan agreement, copies of your passport and social security card, tax returns for the past 3 years. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Someone had used my identity. Someone had stolen my information and taken out an enormous loan in my name. This is fraud, I said firmly. Someone has stolen my information. In that case, Mrs. Toiver, you'll need to file a police report and come to our main office with identification for a formal hearing. But I must inform you that until this matter is resolved, you remain legally responsible for the loan payments. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, feeling the tremor in my hands spread up my arms. Who could have done this? Who had access to my documents, my personal information? The phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. My daughter's name appeared on the screen. Mom, did you remember Zoe's birthday is today? Harper didn't bother with a greeting. We're expecting you at 3. And please don't wear that awful green cardigan. This is a restaurant, not a vegetable garden. And Zoe, my granddaughter, was turning 12. Of course I remembered. I'd already wrapped her gift, a delicate silver bracelet with a star pendant. I remember, Harper, I said, but I have a serious problem. I received a letter from the bank. Mom, not this again, Harper interrupted with barely concealed irritation. If it's another credit card offer, just throw it away. How many times do I have to tell you not to open every piece of mail? Harper, this isn't junk mail. Someone has taken out a loan for nearly $1 million in my name. Silence on the other end. Then a nervous laugh. What are you talking about, Mom? Who would give a pensioner that kind of loan? You're confused. I am not confused, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I have the letter right here. It says in black and white, a loan for $950,000, supposedly issued with my signature. Mom, your blood pressure must be acting up again. Harper's voice took on that saccharine, patronizing tone that always meant she was either lying or extremely irritated. Are you sure you took your medication today? Don't talk to me like I'm senile, I snapped, surprising myself. I rarely raised my voice. I'm perfectly lucid, and I know exactly what's happening. Someone stole my information and took out a loan. I'm going to report it to the police. The police? Harper's voice climbed an octave. Oh my God, Mom. Are you trying to embarrass us in front of the whole town? Look, I'll come by after work. I'll look at this letter and we'll figure it out together. But for God's sake, don't make any calls. All right, I agreed, puzzled by her panicked reaction. Come after work. When I hung up, I stood at the window for a long moment. My daughter's response seemed strange. She'd become anxious too quickly, too defensive. Harper usually dismissed my concerns with condescension, not panic. To distract myself, I prepared for Zoe's party. I took out my dark blue dress, the one I saved for special occasions, and began to iron it carefully, but my mind kept circling back to the mysterious loan. At 3 o'clock, I arrived at the Golden Lily, a pretentious restaurant with astronomical prices and portions sized for dolls. My son Lennox was already there with his wife Deidre and their teenagers, 15-year-old Nolan and 14-year-old Marilyn. Lennox worked as a customs broker and never missed an opportunity to display his status through expensive watches and designer suits. Mom, your hair is sticking out on the left side, he said, instead of greeting me. Didn't you check the mirror? Before you left, hello, Lennox, I said, ignoring the comment. Hello, Deidre. Hello, kids. The teenagers mumbled something without looking up from their phones. Deidre offered a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Where's Harper? I asked, settling into the chair they'd left for me. Running late from work, Lennox replied. Some issue with the Ward case. You know how seriously she takes her responsibilities. Harper worked for social services, dealing with troubled families. She always said her job was rescuing children from incompetent parents. Sometimes I thought that phrase was directed at me too. We'd been waiting at the table for half an hour when Harper finally swept in with her husband Frank and the birthday girl, Zoe. My granddaughter was tall for 12, wearing an expensive dress that made her look like a miniature version of her mother. Grandma, you came, Zoe said with faint surprise, as if my presence at her birthday was somehow unexpected. Of course I came, sweetheart. I wouldn't miss your birthday for anything. I handed her the wrapped box. Happy birthday, darling. Zoe accepted the gift without enthusiasm and set it aside without opening it. Thanks, she mumbled, then turned immediately to her cousin Marilyn to show her something on her phone. Mom, what's this story you invented about a loan? Harper leaned close and whispered in my ear while the others studied their menus. I didn't invent anything, Harper, I whispered back. I have the letter from the bank. For God's sake, don't talk about it in front of everyone. Harper straightened up and said loudly, "Mom, would you like the salad or the soup?" Lunch passed in strained formality. Harper and Lennox discussed business matters, occasionally turning to me with condescending questions like, "Do you still remember Uncle Robert?" Or, "Mom, are you sure you're managing all right in that big house?" My house wasn't big, just 3 bedrooms, a living room, and a kitchen, but the children periodically hinted that I should move somewhere smaller. I suspected they just wanted to sell the property and split the proceeds. When Zoe opened her presents, I noticed Harper and Lennox exchange meaningful glances as my granddaughter carelessly set aside the silver bracelet. "Must be old-fashioned," Harper muttered, loud enough for me to hear. I wanted to explain that it was a replica of my grandmother's bracelet, which she'd worn every day of her adult life, but I kept silent. What was the point of explaining sentimental value to people who only understood price tags? When the party ended, Harper said she'd stop by my house in an hour. I took the bus home, feeling an inexplicable sense of dread. Something about my daughter's behavior unsettled me. At home, I read the bank letter again, more carefully this time. The address of the purchased property looked familiar. Lakeview Terrace was an upscale new development by the lake, frequently featured in the local newspaper. Someone had used my identity to buy a house there. While waiting for Harper, I turned on my computer. A Christmas gift from Lennox last year. "To keep you current, Mom." I wasn't particularly tech-savvy, but I knew the basics. I opened a search engine and typed in the address. 27 Lakeview Terrace, Concord. Photos appeared on my screen. A stunning 2-story house with floor-to-ceiling windows and panoramic lake views. The property value could easily have been close to $1 million. I scrolled down and froze when I saw the sale information. The house had been sold in March of this year. The transaction date matched exactly when the loan had been processed. I heard a car pull up outside and looked through the window. Harper had parked a brand new SUV in front of my house. I noticed the vehicle was different from the mid-sized sedan she'd been driving before. When my daughter entered, I immediately recognized her agitation. She wouldn't meet my eyes, and she kept fussing with her hair, a telltale gesture that always betrayed her nervousness. "Where's the letter, Mother?" she asked without removing her coat. I handed her the envelope silently. Harper scanned the contents quickly, and I watched the color drain from her face. "This is some kind of mistake," she said uncertainly. "Or a scam. Someone used your information." "That's exactly what I told you this morning," I said. "Which is why I'm going to report it to the police." No, Harper said quickly. "I'll handle this myself. I have a friend at Fairview National who can help straighten this out." "I found out something else," I said calmly. "The address in the letter. It's a new house on Lakeview Terrace. A very beautiful house, according to the photos online. 2 stories overlooking the lake." Harper's head snapped up sharply. "You looked it up online?" "Yes," I nodded. "And I also noticed you have a new car. I don't remember you mentioning you were planning to trade in your old one, Mom. What are you implying?" Harper's voice turned hard as steel. "Nothing yet," I shrugged. "Just making observations." Harper clutched her purse tighter. "Look, I told you I'll deal with that stupid letter. You have nothing to worry about." "I think I have plenty to worry about," I countered. "Someone took out a loan in my name, forged my signature, used my documents. If I don't pay that loan, I could lose my house. No one's taking your house." Harper exploded with sudden fury. "Damn it, Mom. Why do you always have to make everything so complicated? I told you I'd solve the problem." She was nearly shouting, and I could see red blotches appearing on her neck, a sure sign of extreme agitation. There was only one thing that could cause such a reaction in Harper. She knew much more about this loan than she was saying. "It was you," I said quietly, looking her straight in the eye. You took out the loan in my name. My daughter looked away. Don't be ridiculous, Mom. Why would I do that? I don't know, I answered. But I'm going to find out. Harper snatched the letter from my hands. I'm taking this. And please don't do anything stupid. Don't call the bank. Don't go to the police. I'll take care of everything. She rushed out of the house, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I stood in the middle of my living room, feeling strangely hollow. My own daughter had stolen my identity to purchase $1 million house, a house she'd never even mentioned to me. I walked slowly back to my computer and reopened the page, showing the house on Lakeview Terrace, a luxurious structure with enormous windows and a terrace overlooking water. A place I'd never been invited to visit. In my inbox, I noticed an unread message from the bank. When I opened it, I found an electronic copy of the loan agreement. This sent to my email address when the transaction was finalized. In the borrower signature field was a crude forgery of my signature, so obviously fake that I couldn't understand how the bank had accepted it. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a cold anger building inside me, not hot rage, but something colder and more resolute. For years, my children had treated me like an inconvenience, tolerating my presence at family events with barely concealed irritation, speaking to me as if I were a confused child, ignoring my opinions. And now Harper had crossed a final line. She hadn't just stolen my identity. She'd endangered the only security I had left, my home, my independence, my dignity. I pulled out my address book and began flipping through it, looking for the right number. I needed a lawyer, but not the kind Lennox would recommend. I needed someone who would take my side against my own children. Attorney Rowan Jett's office was located in an old brick building in Concord's business district. I found her contact information in the city directory, where she modestly advertised herself as specializing in elder law and financial abuse defense. Exactly what I needed. I called first thing the next morning, and the secretary, to my surprise, scheduled an appointment for that same afternoon at 2:30. Apparently, the lawyer's calendar wasn't too crowded. When the bus dropped me at the address, I stood in front of the entrance for several minutes, gathering my courage. The word lawyer had always intimidated me. I'd only consulted attorneys twice in my life, when Harold and I bought our house, and when we drew up his will. In both cases, they were Harold's acquaintances, and he'd handled all the negotiations himself. I can do this, I told myself, and pushed open the heavy door. The reception area was small but welcoming. Behind the desk sat a young woman with short hair and thick-rimmed glasses. Mrs. Toiver, she asked when she saw me. Ms. Jett is expecting you. Please go right in. The lawyer's office was unexpectedly warm. Instead of the austere, formal interior I'd anticipated, I found a bright room with large windows and potted plants everywhere. Behind a wide desk sat a woman in her mid-60s, with close-cropped grey hair and a vibrant blue suit. Hello, Mrs. Toiver. She stood and extended her hand. Rowan Jett, please, have a seat. Her handshake was firm, the grip of someone accustomed to projecting confidence. I settled into the chair she indicated. Tell me what brings you here, Rowan said, pulling out a legal pad. I took a deep breath and began with the letter from the bank. I told her about my call to Fairview National, Harper's reaction, how I'd found photos of the house online, and our last conversation. My voice wavered, but I tried to stay factual, resisting the urge to become emotional. Rowan listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and tapped her pen thoughtfully against the desk. What you've described, Mrs. Toiver, is a classic case of identity theft, aggravated by the fact that the perpetrator appears to be a family member. Unfortunately, this isn't uncommon, especially with elderly victims. Do you really think my daughter did this? I asked, still hoping for some alternative explanation. What do you think? Rowan looked at me carefully. I sighed. I think, yes. The new car, the nervousness about the loan, her desperate attempts to keep me quiet. But I can't believe Harper would go this far. She's always been ambitious and somewhat ruthless, but actual fraud. People change, Rowan said gently, and not always for the better. Tell me, has your daughter shown signs of, shall we say, disregard for your personal autonomy and financial independence? I thought about it. There had been many instances over the years when my children tried to control my decisions, especially regarding money. After my husband Harold died, Lennox insisted I give him power of attorney over my accounts, I said. He claimed it would be safer, but I refused. It caused quite a scene. He even threatened to have me declared incompetent if I continued to be stubborn. And the real estate, Rowan prompted. Have there been discussions about selling your house? I nodded. Constantly, especially in the last 2 years. Harper says it's too big for me, that I can't maintain it properly. Lennox has calculated how much we could get if we sold it. They've even found me a nice little apartment in a retirement community. Rowan made notes on her pad. Do you have a will? Who inherits your estate? Harper and Lennox equally. That's what Harold and I decided years ago, though I've been thinking lately about changing it, leaving everything to the grandchildren instead. I see. Rowan nodded. Now, let's discuss our options. First, we could go to the police and file a fraud report. That's the most aggressive approach and could lead to criminal prosecution of your daughter. I flinched. Harper, a criminal, my daughter in jail. It seemed absurd. Are there other options? I asked quietly. Second option is a civil lawsuit. Rowan continued. We could sue your daughter and seek to have the loan agreement voided as fraudulent. It's less severe than criminal charges, but would still result in public scandal. And the third option. Try to resolve this privately. Rowan shrugged. I could write a letter on your behalf, laying out the facts and demanding your daughter assume the loan or repay it immediately. The threat of criminal prosecution might motivate her to act. I sat in silence, trying to process the information. All the options seemed terrible, but even more terrible was the thought of my own daughter putting me in this position. What happens if I do nothing? I finally asked. If I simply ignore this loan? Rowan shook her head. Then the bank will initiate foreclosure proceedings. First, they'll assess late fees and penalties. Then they'll turn the account over to collections. Eventually, they could sue you and obtain the right to seize your assets, including your house. But that's not fair, I exclaimed. I didn't sign anything. Justice and the law aren't always the same thing, Mrs. Toiver, Rowan said softly. To prove you didn't take the loan, we'd need to prove fraud, and that means identifying the fraudster. I closed my eyes, feeling a lump form in my throat. For as long as I could remember, Harper had been a difficult child, stubborn, sharp-tongued, calculating beyond her years. She'd made few friends in school, but always earned the highest grades. She frequently clashed with her brother, yet somehow always managed to manipulate him. Harold used to say she'd make a great lawyer or politician. Our girl has a spine of steel, he'd say with pride. But there was something else about Harper. Beneath the confident exterior lurked a painful need for validation, for proof of her worth. I'd noticed it in small things, how she'd brag about new possessions, how desperately she tried to impress others, how viciously she reacted to any criticism. I remembered when she was 15, coming home in tears because she didn't get the lead in the school play. That role was mine! Mine! She'd screamed, locking herself in her room. The next day, we learned the girl who'd gotten the part had fallen down the stairs and broken her arm. Someone had pushed her. Harper got the role. Harold and I never discussed the incident openly, but I saw the worry in his eyes. As an adult, Harper hadn't changed. She didn't marry Frank for love. But because he came from a well-connected, respectable family, she chose social services work not out of compassion for troubled families, but because it gave her power over others. And I knew she'd always envied people who lived in upscale neighborhoods, drove expensive cars, vacationed in exotic locations. Mrs. Toiver, Rowan's voice brought me back to the present. Do you need time to think this over? Yes, I nodded. This is too important a decision to make hastily. I understand. Rowan handed me her business card. Call me when you've decided how to proceed. But don't take too long. Time is working against us. I stood to leave, but paused at the door. Ms. Jett, what would you do if you were in my position? Rowan hesitated. I can't give that kind of advice, Mrs. Toiver. Everyone must decide for themselves what matters more, family harmony or justice, and if there's no choice. I asked quietly, if the family harmony is already broken, then there's only justice, Rowan replied simply, and self-respect. I left the office with a heavy heart. Outside, a light rain had begun to fall, and I opened the umbrella I always carried, an old habit my children mocked. Grandma the weather woman, Zoe called me. Mom, there are weather apps now, Harper would say with exasperation. Walking slowly to the bus stop, I thought about Rowan's words, family harmony versus justice. But weren't real families built on mutual respect? Could you truly have a family when some members cheated and exploited others? The bus was delayed, so I sat down on a damp bench. People hurried past, sheltering from the rain, indifferent to strangers' problems, and my mind spun with memories. Harper as a little girl with pigtails, running toward me with a crayon drawing. Mommy, look, it's you. The stick figure woman in the picture had an enormous smile. Harper as a teenager, rolling her eyes when I tried to hug her in front of school. Mom, you're embarrassing me. Harper as a college graduate, proudly displaying her diploma. I could see in her eyes, look, I accomplished this on my own, though it wasn't true. Harold and I had worked double shifts to pay her tuition. After Zoe was born, Harper became even more distant. Her infrequent visits turned perfunctory. Her conversations became litanies of my shortcomings. Mom, you really should take more care with your appearance. Mom, your house looks so dated. Mom, you talk about the past too much. When Harold died, Harper organized the funeral without asking my opinion about anything. She chose the casket, the flowers, even the dress I would wear. You're in no state to make decisions right now, Mom, she'd said, in a tone that brooked no argument. After the funeral, she and Lennox had begun dividing Harold's belongings, as if I didn't exist. His stamp collection, something he'd lovingly assembled over 40 years, Lennox simply took without asking. It'll just gather dust at your place, Mom. I'd become a burden to them, a problem to solve. An old woman who could only be expected to cause trouble. They'd stopped seeing me as a person, if they ever had. The bus finally arrived, and I climbed the steps awkwardly, struggling with my wet umbrella. A young woman offered me her seat, and I nodded gratefully, a small gesture of courtesy from a stranger, more than I'd received from my own children in years. At home, I immediately called the only person I could truly trust, Audrey Flint, my friend from my post office days. Audrey was 5 years older than me, but she had more energy than people half her age. When she was widowed around the same time I was, she didn't sink into depression but threw herself into volunteer work at an animal shelter and even started learning Spanish for general development, as she put it. Winifred, she answered after the third ring. Something wrong. You don't usually call midday. I briefly explained the situation with the loan and my visit to the lawyer. What a snake, Audrey exclaimed when I finished. After everything you and Harold did for her. Winnie, you need to sue. No, go to the police. Make her face the full consequences. I don't know, Audrey, I sighed. She's my daughter. How can I send her to jail? How can she steal from her own mother? Audrey countered. Winnie, listen to me. I know you love your children. All mothers love their children, even the ungrateful ones. But sometimes love means letting them face the consequences of their actions. If Harper gets away with this, what will she try next time? Her words made sense, but I still struggled with the thought of taking legal action against my own daughter. I'll think about it, I said. I need time. Just don't take too much time, Audrey warned. Those bankers won't wait forever. And remember, I'm on your side. Whatever you decide. After talking with Audrey, I felt marginally better. At least there was one person in the world who supported me unconditionally. I made tea and sat by the window, watching the rain intensify into a downpour. The drops drummed against the glass, creating a soothing rhythm. Slowly my thoughts began to clarify. What would Harold say in this situation? My husband had been a kind man, but one with firm principles. Justice must be served, he often said, and also, you can't let people walk all over you, even if those people are your own family. Perhaps I'd let my children disrespect me for too long. Perhaps it was my gentleness, my accommodating nature, that led Harper to believe she could take this step. She knew I'd rather stay silent than cause a scene, but not this time. No more being the doormat people wiped their feet on. No more being invisible, someone whose opinions could be ignored. No more being the out-of-touch old mom, tolerated out of obligation. I picked up the phone and dialed Rowan Jett's number. Mrs. Toiver, she answered, surprise evident in her voice. I didn't expect to hear from you so soon. I've made my decision, I said firmly. I want to file a lawsuit against my daughter and report this fraud to the police. Are you certain? I could hear the caution in Rowan's voice. This is a significant step. I'm absolutely certain, I replied. If I back down now, I'll never respect myself again, and my children will never respect me either. All right, Rowan said after a pause. Come to my office tomorrow morning at 10. We'll prepare the necessary paperwork. As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in years, I'd made a decision based on what I needed, not what my children would think. It was frightening and liberating. The phone rang again. Lennox's name appeared on the screen. Mom, have you lost your mind? He didn't bother with pleasantries. Harper just called me, hysterical. She says you're threatening to sue her over some bank letter. It's not some bank letter, Lennox, I said calmly. Your sister took out a loan in my name, without my knowledge or consent. That's called fraud. Oh, come on, Mom. My son snorted. What's the big deal? So she took out a loan. She's paying it back. Why do you care? The difference is that it's illegal, I said. And if she stops paying, I'm the one who suffers the consequences. She's not going to stop paying. Lennox raised his voice. Jesus Christ, Mom. Have you always been this difficult? Always making everything so complicated? Did you know? I asked directly. Did you know Harper was using my documents? Lennox hesitated for a fraction of a second, long enough to tell me everything I needed to know. I didn't know the details. She said you had an arrangement. We had no arrangement. I cut him off. She stole my identity, and if you knew about it and didn't stop her, you're an accessory. An accessory. Lennox laughed, but it sounded nervous. Mom, you've been watching too many crime shows. Nobody thinks this is actually a crime. It's just a family arrangement. No, Lennox, it is a crime, I said firmly. And I intend to seek justice. For God's sake, Mom. Impatience dripped from every word. What justice? You want to put your own daughter in jail. Humiliate the entire family. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that my children believe I'm so insignificant they can use my name for their schemes without consequence. I replied, I'm thinking you've both treated me like a burden for years, and I'm thinking it's time for that to stop. Mom, listen. Lennox's voice shifted to a wheedling tone. Let me come over and we can discuss this. It's just a misunderstanding. Harper didn't mean any harm. She just wanted a better life for her family at my expense. I finished for him. Don't be so dramatic, Mom. No one's going to stick you with debt. Harper's paying the loan, and she'll continue paying it. What if she loses her job? I challenged. Get sick. Decide she doesn't want to pay anymore. What then? That won't happen, Lennox said confidently. Mom, you need to trust your children. No, Lennox, I replied quietly. It was you who should have respected your mother, but you didn't, and now it's time to pay for that. I hung up without waiting for his response. My hands were shaking, but I felt surprisingly calm. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a helpless old woman, but like a person capable of standing up for herself. Of course, Lennox and Harper would pressure me, use every tactic to make me back down. They'd threaten, flatter, manipulate. They might even try to paint me as a senile old woman out of her mind. But now I had Rowan Jett, a lawyer who believed me and was willing to fight for my rights. I had Audrey, a friend who supported me unconditionally. And I had my own resolve not to let anyone, not even my own children, trample my dignity. The rain outside intensified, but I felt like my life was finally beginning to clear. I picked up the phone and called Rowan's number again. Ms. Jett, I was wondering, if we win this case, what happens to the house Harper bought with the loan money? The bank will most likely seize it to recover the loan amount, Rowan replied. And if your daughter is found guilty of fraud, she could face fines and possibly probation. I understand, I said. Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow. I hung up and thought about what this meant. Harper would lose her dream home. She'd probably get a criminal record. She'd likely hate me for the rest of her life. Lennox would probably side with his sister. I could lose not just my children, but my grandchildren as well. A high price for justice. But the price of silence was even higher. The loss of self-respect. The feeling that I'd betrayed myself by letting my children deceive me with impunity. No, I couldn't back down. This was my last chance to show my children I wasn't worthless. Wasn't a confused old woman, but a human being with rights and dignity. And if achieving that meant coming into conflict with my own family, so be it. I stared out at the rain and thought about how tomorrow would begin a new chapter of my life. A chapter in which I would be the protagonist, not a minor character in my children's stories.